G'day there and welcome to part 3 of the video series looking at Utopian realism, which is a civilizations model based upon reason. In this video, we're going to be looking at objective law in Utopian realism, including morality, rights, and justice. Who determines what's fair? In Utopian realism, how are disputes and conflicts resolved? How are criminals dealt with? What is justice and how is it guaranteed? What mechanism incentivizes people to be good and law-abiding? What's going to stop a devolution into gang warfare and eventual consolidation of power back into government, which is essentially the worst-case scenario of what can possibly happen to a civilization, to a society as government? What is right and wrong? And how is that decided? What system are courts going to follow to ensure objectivity? And what will prevent corruption and collusion? Well, to understand this, first, what is law? What is law? And so law is a set of rules that govern human interaction aimed at being fair and in the equal interests of everyone to protect individual rights. Actually, I need to say that's what objective law is. Subjective law, well, no, that's to benefit the whims of the ruling class. Objective law is a set of rules that govern human interaction aimed at being fair and in the equal interests of everyone to protect individual rights. That's just one way you can explain what law is. So who makes the law in Utopian realism? Well, judges inside the court system. Well, I need to make this caveat as well, apart from this fundamental law which I'm presenting to you right now, because I've already discovered that alongside many other objectivist philosophers or many other people throughout history of humanity. We've done some good things in history, so we've got this, but then any other subsequent law, that's what I'm speaking about specifically right now. Who makes the laws in Utopian realism? Well, judges inside of the court systems. On what grounds are these rules created? Well, they're based upon objective morality, and that's the same with these Utopian realism laws as well, which we'll get into. Well, who determines what's moral? When we look at history, people have all these different ideas of what moral is. If you go back hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands of years ago, they may have thought it was moral to castrate someone for stealing a loaf of bread. So we need to find an objective moral ground here, because obviously that's not right. Again, the question, who determines what's moral? Well, objective philosophers do. That's who determines what's moral. And how do they decide this? And they do that by discovering objective reality. And how is that established? Well, that's established by identifying the metaphysical axioms of existence. Oh, that's complicated. No, it's not really. It's very simple. So how is that achieved? Well, you use reason to figure out those axioms, which we'll touch on in a minute. And, well, how is reason confirmed to be valid? Well, by confirming cause and effect relationships, predicting outcomes and observing results, to say very, very shortly. How are mistakes prevented? By inductive, methodical research and comparing results to the established axioms. Might be sounding a little bit complicated, but it's good to have that firm, solid foundation. You want to have a starting point that is incontestable. So any equitable, objective law must start from the most fundamental of all fundamentals, the axioms of metaphysics. 1. Existence exists, which may seem obvious, but to some people it's not. 2. We're conscious of it. Again, that may seem obvious to some people, but to some it's not. 3. The law of identity. And that may not seem obvious, because that can be a little bit complex and confusing if you've never heard of it, but it's actually very simple. And to summarize what those 3 axioms translate into in layman's terms, we exist, we know it, and everything is what it is and it's not what it's not. With these self-refuting axioms, and by self-refuting it means if you try to argue against any of them, you just end up defeating yourself. If you try and say you're not conscious or existence doesn't exist or things are not what they are, you just end up losing. You can't beat those axioms, and that's why I like them. They're your guiding locus. Just unassailable. They create such an indomitable starting point for objectively equitable law. Because as human beings, we have a nature and an identity. We're rational beings who must use our conceptual faculty to survive as human qua human. That just means in the capacity of, as humans. Just imagine people trying to survive like a lion would, or even a dog out in the wild, or a cat. We just can't do it. We need sticks to kill other things. We need knives to skin them and gut them. Even if you're going to eat fruits, how do you know what type of fruits and vegetables are safe to eat? How do you know how to plant them, how to find them, compete with other animals, protect yourself? We, as a species, must use reason. Even if you're a vegetarian and you're living out in the wild, you're going to freeze to death if you don't skin an animal and wear them as a rug, or know how to start a fire, how to seek shelter. All these very interesting things when you start to question, how did that really happen back in the beginning? But that's a history video. Let's keep it on track with law. To ensure our proper survival, our rights must be realized and protected. Rights are conditions of existence necessary for proper survival. Ayn Rand, she coined that term, and I love it, or that definition of rights. We all have the right to perform any action provided it does not cause imposition. So I modified that line from Mark Passio and just modified it to get it a bit more specific. So to say those again, because they're really important, because a lot of people who support rights, you ask them, what are rights? And they say, I don't know, I've got no idea. Or they'll say something without any understanding of what rights actually are. Because animals don't have rights, humans do, because we're intelligent, conscious beings. That's what separates us from the animals. Rights are conditions of existence necessary for proper survival. Because if we don't have rights, we can't properly survive. Because it'll be like barbarian, indigenous, savage days where everyone rapes and kills each other. That's not proper survival. We all have the right to perform any action. Do whatever you want, provided it does not cause imposition. If you want more details on that, I've got another video I can put down in the link to learn more. Or actually on this website page, there's a whole playlist that goes into a whole lot of detail explaining this. So this means that we have the right to self-defense and retaliatory force, but not to initiate it. Rights are great, but what's the point if they can't be enforced? Actually, I'm just going to highlight that line again. Is very important. That is a key component of the law and morality inside of utopian realism. We have the right to retaliatory force. That's what's objectively moral, retaliatory force. You can do whatever is necessary in proportion to the crimes committed against you to retaliate with force, but not to initiate it. You can even say to never initiate force. Or there might be some extreme circumstance, and no, I don't think there's ever a circumstance when you try. If you can think of a circumstance where it's right to initiate force, please let me know, because I cannot think of it, and I haven't come across any other great minds who can think of it. But retaliatory force, oh yes, that is morally righteous to do that. So moving on, rights are great, but what is the point if they cannot be enforced? Pointless then. Rights can only be enforced when enough good as self-interested people group together to create an orderly system to protect them. It's in everyone's interest, everyone's, to have their rights protected. Whether you're a saint or a tyrant, no one wishes to have their rights violated. This is what always motivates humans to formalize legal systems to protect themselves against assailants of their rights. Unfortunately, what often occurs is that these laws become subjectively favored to the ruling class and their greedy desires. Utopian realism, in contrast, always operates by objective law. If the law of a society is not objective nor equitable, then it is not utopian realism. Just like if a system doesn't operate under voluntary consent or anarchy, then it's not true capitalism, if you'd watched a couple previous videos. And I recommend to watch this series in order because it's all stacking upon each other. The current legal system has a colossal amount of cons, but it does have some pros, it really does, such as due process, innocent until proven guilty, and rules of evidence. Utopian realism is a system of objective practicality. Keep what is useful, discard the rest. What is objective about the current legal system and courts will be and should be kept. Everything which is subjective and nonsensical will be excised. The Utopian realism doesn't propose to build the entire legal system from the ground up. It says, no, here are these objective points, which we'll get into the key points, and then it says build upon that using this framework of what's objectively moral and the current legal system. Use what they have that is good about it and just discard the rest. Like Bruce Lee says, keep what is useful, discard the rest. The 4 guiding laws of objective morality are as follows. Create no harm, create no loss, be honest and ethical in your dealings, maintain the peace. The primary guiding principle is the golden rule of equity, which is treat others as you wish to be treated. So simple. We knew this as children, but somewhere along the line we forgot it. No one wants to be raped, assaulted, murdered, deceived, robbed. So don't do to others that which you would not want done to yourself. Even if you're someone that loves to rape people, loves to murder, deceive, if you work for the cabal, you do not want that to happen to yourself. So this is such a common sense, basic, 5th grader level intellectual understanding. It's so simple, and that's why I love it, because good law should be simple. Hand in hand with the golden rule is the universal principle. Before acting, one must always ask themselves, if everyone did this, would the world be better or worse? Would I wish for everyone to act like this all the time? If I'm going to double park, should I double park? Even for simple things that may not be considered a crime, but should I be doing this? Should I push in front of someone in line? Should I lie, cheat, steal? And obviously there are caveats to all these as well. Like sometimes, because the thing is, it's not a blanket statement saying lying is immoral and you should never ever do it. No, because there's a time and place objectively where you should lie. If a crazed axe murderer comes knocking on the door and is asking for your friend or your partner, you say, I've never heard of them, they're not here, right? You're lying for an objectively moral purpose. Yes, most of the time you should be moral and honest, but sometimes there are exceptions. It's not a blanket universal statement. But this is a universal principle because in that situation with the axe murderer, yes, you would want everyone else in that same situation to do the same thing. You wouldn't want people to double park. You don't want people to cut in line. You don't want people to tell the truth that their partner is inside and to allow the axe murderer in to kill them because you don't want to lie. This is just a very short summary on what these points are, the golden rule of equity, the universal principle, but it makes it so easy. It makes it so easy to understand right from wrong. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Just put it through those filters. If everyone in the world did this, would it be a better or worse place? Would I wish for everyone to act like this all the time? Do I want to be treated like this? If you do that, 99.98% of the time, you're not going to have any problems. You're not going to be initiating problems, that's what I mean. The modification of today's laws will be in alignment with these laws and principles of utopian realism and the axioms. This will ensure that all law is objective, equitable, and does not violate anyone's rights, but protects it as per the purpose of the law. That's the purpose of the law, is to protect rights, to create order and civility, not to feed the pockets of evil, greedy, bad people, which is what the law, the subjective legislation has become today. Justice in utopian realism is treating people as they deserve. In regards to criminals, utopian realism focuses on rehabilitation and remedy rather than torture and punishment. Criminals are viewed as being afflicted with a mental illness, and justice is their curing alongside the protection of the innocent. The current prison system, they focus on causing pain and suffering for criminals, which only creates more crime once they're released. If you were to commit a crime, and don't say you never could because you can, you'd want the opportunity to atone for the hurt you've caused and to correct your behavior. Rather than simply being locked in a cage and treated without dignity, and even if you didn't want to atone for the hurt, you wouldn't want to be locked in a cage and treated without dignity, because it's going to make you worse and you'll get released eventually and you'll do worse things. The ability to right your wrongs and redeem yourself becomes possible and probable when guided by the golden rule of equity and objective justice. Utopian realism law also includes inchoate crimes and reckless endangerment. For reckless endangerment, things like, did someone nearly cause harm by drunk driving or racing through a school zone? They may not have actually hurt someone, but the probability that they could have, we can't have people acting that recklessly because it's dangerous and it's so easy for them to actually hurt people. Did someone plan to cause harm? Now this is an inchoate crime, like a nascent crime. Did someone plan to cause harm but was stopped before they could execute it? So they had planned to be a terrorist or something like that, but then or to run for government, but then they were stopped before they could actually do that. So sufficient evidence must be available to prosecute these types of uncommitted crimes because they can be seen as uncommitted crimes. Because a crime like harm or loss wasn't actually enacted, but one of them, the inchoate crime, was just about to. Like you found all their plans that they were going to become a police officer or a banker or a politician, something terrible, and then they were stopped, or they were just being reckless. They were shooting down the street or something, and they weren't aiming at anyone, but it's like, whoa, you don't do that. That's reckless endangerment. So these key points, they form the foundation of utopian realism's law and are the framework for all following law to be built upon. That's what I mean. Judges in these objectively privatized systems, then they can build more law upon this, because there's always going to be so many little nuanced details and more law will need to be created, but this is the objective foundation. And if a law is in contradiction to these axioms, laws, and principles, it's a subjective bad law. So again, to summarize the key points, you have objective reality and the metaphysical axioms, which is existence, exists, consciousness, that we're conscious, and identity. The law of identity, or it can also be called the law of non-contradiction. This whole playlist dedicated to learning about that in more detail. Next, you have objective morality, the laws of objective morality. So 1, create no loss, create no harm, be honest and ethical in your dealings, maintain the peace. And then you have rights. We all have the right to perform any action, provided it does not cause imposition. Then we have the golden rule of equity, to treat others as you wish to be treated. The universal principle, act only in a way you'd be happy or approve of if everyone else did the same. So another way to formulate the universal principle. And then you have those uncommitted crimes like reckless endangerment and inchoate crime. And this is just a foundation. Obviously, if you want to go into more detail, you can expand this even further, but this is the fundamentals that are absolutely critical. You must have those. Now I want to get a bit more specific into rights. What rights do we actually have in utopian realism? And when I say that, I mean, what rights do we objectively have, regardless of people's opinions? What rights do we have as a fact of life, a fact of existence and the nature of reality itself? What rights can we discover, not create? What rights can we discover we actually have? And so we all have equal rights. There are no collective or corporate rights, only that of living individuals. Because as humans, that's all we are, living individual humans. And that's also because it's impossible to delegate rights. You can't give a corporation rights. A corporation only has the rights that the individuals running that corporation have. Like, that would be crazy to think you could possibly give a corporation or a fictional entity, a non-living thing, rights. No. You can have a corporation as a business structure, but it all comes back to the people that are running that corporation, because at the end of the day, it's just people. The first and foremost right that we have is the right to life. Without it, all other rights are null and void. We also have the right to property, self-defense, travel, association, discrimination, bodily autonomy, speech, privacy, trade, and contract. And there may be some others that I'm forgetting as well. You have the right to properly survive and pursue rational happiness. That's what the right to life is all about, and everyone has that equal right. With property, you have the right to own what you ethically acquire. Like, of course, you have the right to private property, But if you steal it from someone else, well, you have not ethically acquired. And some people say that you have the right to whatever you create, but it depends. Was there a contract? You contracted to some music industry and whatever music you create is actually the rights of someone else? If you signed a contract, well, it's not rightfully your song or your painting that you make or the sculpture or the house that you build, whatever it is, if you have contracted and given legal rights of title and ownership to someone else. So it depends what comes first. But normally you have the right to what you ethically acquire. Next, you have the right to protect your life using proportionate self-defense, including killing if the context demands it. For instance, if a little old lady pushes you on the street, it always comes back to the little old lady. I love a little old lady. If she pushes you in the street, you've got the right to defend yourself. If you're someone like me or big and strong than most people really, you could just hold her back. You're using force to defend yourself. But do you have the right to punch her in the face and stomp on her throat? Well, no, because that's just ridiculous. Maybe she even was trying to kill you, but it's out of proportion. There's no need for that. But if someone came up to you in the street and was a strong-looking man and it's 2 a.m. down a side alley and he's attacking you, maybe he even pulls out a knife, in that situation, you could lawfully have the right to kill them in response. Ideally, well, not even ideally, it can be argued ideally how much force you actually use in that situation, but if someone's got a knife, they're trying to kill you, I personally think you are in your rights to kill them in self-defense. There can be a lot more discussion about that, which is quite interesting, but we'll leave it at that for now. You have the right to move freely, limited only by the decisions of private property owners in objective, rational context. Because at the moment we've got closed borders. Most of the land in the world is controlled by the cabal through their governments, which controls public property, and people think public property is theirs, but no, it's not. Public property, there's no public property. It's just, we get into that in one of the next, I think that's the next video actually. So I'll save that for then, but there's no public property. It's a misnomer. But in Utopian realism, a rational, objective, real world system that's not fantasy, that's built in actual reality, you're only limited in your movements by private property owners. Just like at the moment, if you have a house and land, you have your property, and you say, James, you're not allowed to come on my land. Okay, I'm not allowed to come on your land. And if I do, well, then you have the right to self-defense, you have the right to call private security, and so does every other private property owner. They have the right to do the same to you. So it needs to be in rational context. Obviously, you can elaborate a lot more on that as well. You have the right to associate with whomever you please, provided they give their consent, obviously, and this includes large assemblies. So you have the right to assembly. But I don't think you have the right to assemble on property that is not yours. For instance, I know today when there are rallies and protests, it's on public property, so really it's on the tyrannical enemy of freedom and the people, it's on their property, so they can be damned. This is a retaliatory force to go on their roads and in their streets. But in Utopian realism, when all the streets and roads are privately owned by individuals who aren't trying to control and subjugate and dominate you and extract every piece of wealth that you have, then you don't have the right to protest and rally on private property owners' roads. You don't have the right to do that. If you have the right to assemble in 10,000, 100,000, million people, but on private property where you have the consent of the private property owner. So moving on, you have the right to discriminate. And people think, oh, discrimination is this awful, evil thing. No, it's not. We discriminate all the time, and that's perfectly moral. You should be discriminating. It depends in the context and how you're viewing that. But you want to view that objectively. Right? Discriminate means to choose who you do not wish to associate with. If you don't like particular people, you don't have to be around them. You say, I don't like that person, I don't want to be around them. You walk away, you go somewhere else. Discriminate. It's one of the best ways to resolve conflicts. Discriminate. Don't be around people you don't like, because most of the time, conflicts occur when people associate with other people they don't get along with. So discriminate more. It's good. And also, if you have a business, if you don't want to let particular people into your business, if you don't want to deal with particular people in your business, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to let people you don't want into your business. That choice is up to you and no one else can determine that. Obviously, it's probably not in the best interests of business owners to do that if they discriminate against people with blonde hair, lesbians, people that are 20 kilos overweight. Well, I mean, some personal trainers, they discriminate. They say, I only work with people who've got 20 kilos or more to lose. Or some personal trainers, they say, I only work with people who've got less than 5 kilos. I want to work with bodybuilders. Discrimination is fine. It's not just fine, it's good. It's a good thing to do. Even if you want to be ridiculous about it, right? And you discriminate and say people with blonde hair can't come into my supermarket, or people who don't wear a mask, or who are over the age of 50. Like, again, it's your right to do that. You're going to lose business. And because in utopian realism, it's a capitalistic system, another competitor who doesn't discriminate stupidly will allow you to go into their business and they're going to succeed. Because that business that is stupidly discriminating, well, they're going to build a bad reputation and they're probably going to lose customers. So there's a difference between stupid discrimination and rational discrimination. That is an important distinction to understand. Next, you have the right to do with your body as you please, bodily autonomy. And so that includes self-harm, suicide. You have the right to do that. And it can be argued, seek help and other people have the right to help you, etc. But you do have the right to do that. You have the right to use steroids, to use drugs. You have the right to abortion. You have the right to use vaccines. You have the right to get tattoos and piercings, etc. Provided you're over the age of 18, then you have the right to do these things. Under the age of 18, well, you're not an adult then, so no. Well, to go into full detail, it's going to take a lot more explanation, which I'm not covering in this video because there's lots of topics just in that one sentence of bodily autonomy. And lots of people argue against probably the most contentious point there would be abortion. I've got a dedicated video about abortion. There are arguments for viable fetus rights, but the whole principle here is that only individual living humans have rights. Individual living humans have rights. Anything and everything else does not. It is your body and you can use it how you wish, provided, of course, it does not harm another living individual human. Very specific there. And this is probably one of the major reasons why I need to state utopia is not perfect, but it's the closest there is. I think it's perfect. I think utopia is perfect, but it'll never be perfect for everyone. Because if you're a criminal, you obviously want systems to get away with committing crimes. If you are anti-abortion, well, you'd look at this system and you say, well, I love 99% of utopian realism, but it allows abortion, so therefore I don't want this system. Give me something worse. People may say that that's probably going a bit too far. Intelligent people might say, they'd look at this and say, okay, I agree with 99%. I don't agree with the abortion, so it's not perfect, but okay, this is the best we've got. You can't have a perfect system. You can't have a system that pleases everyone. I look at this system and I think it is perfect. If I don't know how to improve this whole utopian realism civilizations model to make it any better, I think it is the literal perfect society, perfect civilizations model to have humans interacting with each other. But time tells. So to fully tell whether this system is perfect, you need it to be in action properly for hundreds or perhaps even thousands of years. So I can't say that with 100% certainty that this is the perfect system. And maybe even then it is the perfect system, but there's still always problems with the perfect system. Perfect in this objective context may be that there actually is no perfect for humans because they're always causing conflict and finding ways to cause trouble. Moving on. You have the right to say what you wish, so freedom of speech, including hate speech. You of course have the right to hate speech. If you want to talk about how you hate people, that's perfectly fine. You have the moral right to do that, but you don't have the right to initiate threats against others, to say, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to steal this from you, I'm going to break your car, I'm going to cause harm against you. No, that's the kind of speech you don't have the right to because that is then threatening. And a threat is essentially causing harm. So no, you don't have the right to do that, but you can say everything else you want, including hate speech. If you hate Jews, if you hate black people, if you hate white people, if you hate philosophers, if you hate YouTubers, whatever, go for it. That's not causing any harm. There's no problem with that. Sure, it may be offensive, but being offended isn't a crime. Being offensive isn't a crime. You have the right to bodily, intellectual, and financial privacy in rational contexts. It's like if you're using cash, you have the right to use cash because other people don't have the right to know what you're doing. And that's why I love the freedom credit, because it's a fully private currency, because you have the right to financial privacy, which no one in the world has today. There's not really any such thing as financial privacy in the world today, but we have the right to it, and it'd be great to have a money which was fully private. Because how can you have a free world if there isn't privacy? Privacy is just intrinsically linked to freedom. And you have the right to bodily and intellectual privacy, and so it depends on the context. You can't walk down the street and say, I have the right to privacy, no one look at me. No, but if you go into a toilet, you have the right to privacy. If you go in your home, no one has the right to put cameras and audio devices into your home, etc. And I also put intellectual privacy down there as well because of technology that may be available today or built in the future, which could read your thoughts, somehow use some technology that can read your mind. Well, no one has the right to do that because that would be a breach of intellectual privacy. So if you have a superpower of mind reading, well, that could be contentious. Next, you have the right to trade however you please with whomever you want, provided it is ethical. So if you want to use cash, if you want to use freedom credits, bitcoins, Moneros, you have the right to trade however you want. If you're swapping things, right, you can do that with whoever you want, provided it's ethical. And I put that point in there because some people may trade with children that they've stolen. So no, you can't trade like that just because you have the right to trade however you please. You can't do it in a dishonest, or not even dishonest, but an unethical manner, immoral, evil way. You can't do that. But taking those extreme examples away, you have the right to trade however you please, to use whatever currency you and the other party consent to. You have the right to contract however you wish. So you can form any consensual contracts, according to, I believe, I have a video about contracts, and I like making videos about all my different ideas and principles because I can't remember it all. Because how many points are there to an ethical contract? I believe it's 9, but I'd need to check my work again. I can't remember. If I sat down for an hour, I'd be able to remember it all. But off the top of my head, I just can't remember. But I'm pretty sure there's 9 points to an ethical contract and you want to have all of them. If there isn't, well, it's not an ethical contract. But say, for instance, all 9 have been pointed out and both parties are fully aware. And one of them says, I want you to pay me $100 within 1 week, otherwise I'll cut your arm off. And someone agrees to that. Well, you have the right to contract and do that. But then when it comes to enforcement, the courts and private security in utopian realism aren't going to enforce cruel and unusual punishment or slavery. You have the right to contract in it. If you breach the contract and then they cut off your arm, well, man, I think that's going to require some more complex thinking and longer videos. But the point here is the courts won't enforce cruel and unusual punishment. That is already a maxim that exists today. I like that. And slavery, not going to enforce that. But you could contract yourself into slavery if you wanted to. Okay, you can do that. Well, that's a contentious point as well, because it depends on the context of the slavery. You might have an S&M, like a domination submission relationship, and it's a man being enslaved to a woman being enslaved to a man, and that's all it is. It stays in that context, and she or he isn't ordering the other one to commit crimes. It's just they're a slave to each other in like a sexual fantasy way. But then you have other situations where someone may be a slave and then the master is ordering the slave to commit crimes, which is most of the world today. I got to be careful saying very contentious statements like that because it requires 100,000 words to explain what I actually mean, because it may just cause conflict with the viewer. But let's move on. I won't get stuck on that point. Next is the practicality of justice and rehabilitation. So on the site, I've got an example here of a crazy street fight that was at Disneyland. When you go on the website and you want to watch that video, you need to log into YouTube because it's age restricted. So have an account, log in, watch that. It's just a stupid fight at Disneyland and it's crazy. There's kids everywhere. It's not good. And I'm just using that as an example to show the practicality of justice and rehab of utopian realism and then comparing that against the current system. Depending on the circumstances of the crime, the exact procedure will change. Let's look at that fight. That fight has just happened right now. What will happen in the current system is that bystanders, they call the police, and the police are paid by theft, taxation. What they then do is they arrest and release the criminal on the same day, inform him to attend court in 3 months, and in that time period he has plenty of opportunity to reoffend. So that's a very short summary of what would happen in the current system. In utopian realism, bystanders will call private security, private police, instead of the centralized, monopolized mafia, dystopian police. That's a way to put it. The private security, they arrest the man, gather evidence immediately, like the video footage, they already had the video footage, take the criminal immediately to a private court for trial. There's no messing around here. There's no 3 months. It's, wow, this crime has been committed. We need to take it seriously because we take the security of our society seriously. We take justice seriously. We're not pretenders, not fakers. We're not subjectivists like this current dystopian system. We take this objectively seriously. So that criminal, he needs to go to court now, especially because they've got evidence now of what has happened. If they don't have evidence right now, well, that person still needs to be segregated from the rest of society because they've demonstrated that they are a danger to others. And you cannot let a dangerous criminal roam free amongst others when they've just proven that they're unsafe. So again, the current system, the criminal will commit crimes, other crimes, in the time he is waiting for court, and he'll get away with them. In utopian realism, well, because that criminal has been taken to court immediately in this situation, the private court judges the evidence and finds him responsible for assault. And it looks like they were on drugs, so they're going to do drug tests and mental instability. And they can have a psychologist at the court, though most likely it's going to be very clear and obvious that those people in that specific situation of the assault at Disneyland, they're mentally unstable. You cannot allow that to roam free. So the next point in the current system is that the criminal would go to the initial hearing and would plead not guilty. Let's say that that's what the criminal is doing. And the court is adjourned for another 2 months. Okay, and this is what happens. Okay, not guilty. All right, come back in 2 months because we're so busy. We're backlogged. We can't fit you in tomorrow. You've got to come back in 2 months and give you plenty of time to prepare. Plenty of time. What would actually happen in utopian realism is that on that same day, the criminal is sentenced to a drug and anger rehabilitation program inside a rehab center until he recovers. He's mentally sick. That judgment has been made. He needs to get better. Here is the program that's going to help you get better inside the rehab center. In the current system, what would happen is that the criminal returns for his trial and his government-provided lawyer, paid via tax, that's assuming he does have a government-provided lawyer, he may get his own, but the lawyer is going to claim that due to mental instability, his client should be allowed to walk free. And that's what's happening in this case right now. The judge adjourns the case so the criminal can receive a psych eval to excuse his actions. So, okay, go away, go do that, come back later. So all extra time to commit all these extra crimes. In utopian realism, the criminal is escorted by private security to the rehab center where he is incarcerated until his recovery. This will typically all happen on the same day to prevent further harm to the community. In the current system, the criminal returns weeks or months later with his psych eval and is either let off completely or he's sentenced to imprisonment. If he is let off, well, he's going to continue to be a threat to society. If he's jailed, he won't get better, and innocents who had nothing to do with the crime will pay for his torture. Because what are the current prison systems if not torture dungeons? That's what they are. Yes, could they be worse? Of course, but it's still torture, the way they treat them in those prisons. I've got a full video looking at the Norwegian system of rehabilitation. I think they do it the best in the world. Could they do it better? Yeah, probably, but still they've got very, very good systems in Scandinavia as opposed to everywhere else in the world that I've seen so far. And there's a video on the page, you could check that out. In Utopian Realism, the criminal will pay out of his own pocket for his stay in the rehab centre. It just makes sense, it's so obvious. If he has no money, he'll work inside the facility, which will provide an income stream to reimburse the private security who arrested him, who escorted him to court, who escorted him to the rehab centre. They're working, they need to earn their money, they can't just steal it like the monopolised police. These private security need to actually earn it, so they need to do their job and they need to do it well. They need to be reimbursed, and why would innocent people who had nothing to do with the crime pay for it? That's just absurd. The courts, they did a job too. They need to be reimbursed. They need to be paid in the rehab centre for their program. All their staff, their psychologists and their counsellors and their security, they need to be paid. And so the criminal needs to work inside the facility. If he has no money to afford all that, he needs to work and then he'll earn money for the facility and then he can pay those businesses. He committed the crime, so it is just that he shall pay for it. Next, the current system. If the man is imprisoned in the current system, he may be locked up for years, experiencing terrible conditions. And this will further devolve his mind, and when released is very likely to reoffend, and the entire cycle begins again. The police, courts and prison in the current system are all paid via theft. They steal all their money. They don't earn any of it. And not only do they not fix the problem, they make it worse. They make it worse. They try and fight evil with evil. It's just incoherent nonsense. Oh, I get passionate about this. I love it because it's so obvious. Next, this is the final one. In Utopian Realism, so the criminal funds his own rehabilitation and stays in the facility only as long as necessary. Well, the program might be 8 weeks or 12 weeks, however long the program is, but then if they need extra time because they're not deemed suitable to leave yet, well, they'll have to stay inside the rehab centre for longer, which may take years if they're really messed up, because if they're not ready to leave, they're not ready to leave. But if they are ready to leave, they are. Let them out. There's no point keeping them for longer than necessary. That's wrong. This approach makes taxation unnecessary while significantly reducing recidivism. Recidivism is the technical term for the reoffence rate. And in the current system, it's massive. So many people who go to prison, they get out and then they commit crimes straight away again. In this system, and we can look at Norway, the recidivism rate is much, much lower. And as the system gets better and better and more countries do it, there's going to be a sharing of knowledge and ideas of what works, what doesn't. Ideally, you'd want to get to the point where the recidivism rate is 0. Oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? Everyone who enters as a criminal exits as a saint. But saint's probably not the right word, but as a good man or woman. The private security profits from doing a good job. The courts profit by providing equitable judgments and just sentences. And the rehab centre, they profit from effective programs. The community is safer. The rehabilitated individual becomes a productive member of society. And just think, who would you want as your neighbour? Who would you want as your neighbour? The man who was tortured in prison because you wanted to get revenge against them? You want them living as your next door neighbour? Or would you want someone who's gone through an effective rehabilitation program, is off the drugs, has had their mental illnesses cured? Because how often do stable, healthy people commit crimes? Practically never. Healthy, stable people don't commit crimes. It's mentally unstable and unhealthy people who commit crimes. From all the way up to the central bankers, down to politicians, and then police, and then to, I was going to say homeless people. They typically don't commit that many crimes, but maybe rapists or muggers or carjackers, very low level, small level criminals. All of them are mentally unstable and unhealthy. That's the only reason they're going to commit crimes. Someone who's mentally stable and healthy does not commit crimes. That's pretty simple. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Cut that out. I think that is simple. I'm going to leave that in there. And so all of this occurs without stealing from innocence. Not necessary. And if victims of crimes, if they seek compensation, they can sue, and the criminal may be required to provide financial restitution. And so just finishing up with one more statement about this. Ideally, if enough eyewitness testimonies and evidence is available, the trial, sentencing and incarceration happens all on the same day. When one commits a crime, they lose their right to freedom and they must earn it back. But that's the thing, they can earn it back, and it's up to them how fast they earn it back. If more time is required to attain evidence, then all haste is made to remedy the situation. But I still think it is morally right to detain that person and acquire that evidence as fast as possible and then to put them into that rehab center. The specifics can be discussed later. The current system of allowing dangerous criminals to roam free for months until trial is an inefficient disgrace. Private security will assist the criminal in making arrangements if they have dependents, if they have children, or if they've got work, whatnot. Private security will be there to assist them and help them to organize all that before taking them to the rehab center. And even when they're in the rehab center, they can have their family visit them, or they can work from the center if they need be, so they've got internet and their phones and computers are not completely cut off like it is in the current system. So they can work on a laptop inside the rehab center, and that's probably encouraged because that's what healthy, stable people of society actually do. They work for a living, they provide value and they contribute. They don't steal, they don't attack people, etc. Okay, so the current system is very slow. It's funded by theft from innocence and provides unjust, immoral outcomes that typically worsen the situation. Whereas utopian realism excels in swift outcomes, equitable rehab programs, and ensures justice is funded by criminals, not innocents. So I've stressed that point because it's very important. Yeah, so I highly recommend check out that video, Rehab versus Punishment. It's episode 5 in my series about why a government can never work, which is part of a bigger series called Comparing Policies to Principles. Fantastic series, highly recommend that. So we're almost finished here. We've got next, who regulates business? Because I've spoken to other people about my idea for this system. I say, well, who's going to regulate all this? How was that done? And here's my answer. The idea of central regulating bodies is impractical, inefficient, and immoral to do that. It's an outdated idea that only causes problems and fills the pockets of those who cause the problems. In a capitalistic society, under utopian realism, there are no regulating bodies. People and businesses do as they please in accordance with objective law. So really you could say it's objective law, which is the regulating body, except it's not a regulating body, it's just a code to action. It's a guide on what you can and can't do based upon objective principles, which are derived from reality itself. It's what we discover about our nature and identity of what we are as rational, intelligent, conscious, conceptual human beings. If there are no violations of utopian realism's foundational law, the key points I said earlier, it's almost guaranteed that individuals and businesses can simply proceed with their planned course of action. So I said almost guaranteed. There's no need to check in with a regulating agency if they're breaking one of a million, and I'm not exaggerating there, of a million ever-changing, incoherent legislative acts. Try and read their legislation. It's incoherent. It's nonsensical. It's ridiculous. It's so deceptive and manipulative and dishonest. It's probably the most evil thing I've ever seen in my life is the legal system. And I'm judging that on the level of deception and complexity. Actually, I made a series, 4-part series about the nature of evil as well. And I explained that in more detail. What keeps people in check is the real threat of being sued for negligence or damages. This is what motivates business owners to provide the best / honest, goods and services, because sometimes businesses might not want to provide the best, they want to make their products cheaper, but provided they're being honest and they're informing their customers what the quality of the materials or the quality of the food is, well then that's fine. You want to provide the best or the most honest goods and services. For instance, a restaurant wishes to maintain a high standard because if they don't, they can get a bad reputation and can go out of business. Or worse, they may be sued if they sell toxic food. So there's no need for a regulating body to say, this is what you can and can't do inside your business. That's ridiculous. You don't have it like that. People are not absolute idiots. I understand sometimes they act like it, but when you treat people in that kind of way, then they act like that because you're treating them like that. Stop treating people like idiots and they'll stop behaving like idiots. Treat them like rational, intelligent human beings, living men and women. Then they'll start behaving like that. They will. If you're a business, you want a reputation, you want to make money, you want to profit, you want to be selfish. You want to make money so then you can buy the things that you want. If you're selling toxic food, if you've got rats running around in the kitchen and cockroaches out on the tables, who's going to come to your business? You'll gain a terrible reputation, you'll lose your customers. People will get sick and then they'll sue you. Then they can hire some kind of inspector to go in there and check that. And now you have a legal right to do that because you've got sick from eating there, and there's all this other detail that can go into how that works. It's just be honest. Do things well, live by the golden rule of equity, the universal principle. If everyone adopts that mindset, then things work better. And even if not everyone does, but the courts do, well, things are just going to get better for everyone. And it's so simple to understand. No wonder people commit so many crimes and are so evil nowadays. It's because they don't know what's right and wrong. Because the bad guys have complicated it so much. It's so complex and confusing. Lawyers need to go to courts for years and... they need to go to universities for years and years and years, and they still have no idea about what's right and wrong. They just understand subjective legislation, arbitrary whims of the ruling class. They know nothing about actual objective morality, or very little about it. And that's why this system is so good, because it's so simple. Children can understand it. Sure, there may be some nuanced details that are a little bit more complex, but most of it is very simple. So private road owners, this is another example. They will keep their roads in orderly conditions, and you may, because this ties in, this is a whole series, so it's all interconnected. You might not understand what I mean about private road owners, so just keep watching the series to get a full comprehension of that, right? So they're going to keep their roads in orderly condition so as to not lose business or be liable for car damages or accidents and even deaths. That's why private road owners they want to keep their roads well maintained. They don't want to have potholes and cracks, because if they do, people can sue them. They can lose business. It's when things are just motivated by profit, just the world becomes such a better place. And it's so bloody obvious. That's just our nature. That is our nature, but we've gone so against it. We just need to come back to our selfish nature. Rational self-interest. And to understand that concept, you need to watch playlists as well, because that is a concept which has been inverted. So then the bad guys can control you, me, and the whole world. Coming back to law, this common sense approach to running a business with high standards in accordance with the golden rule of equity is almost all that's necessary to achieve civility, because that's one thing we do not have today. All disputes of misconduct or misunderstandings, because sometimes it's just general misunderstandings. This is my fence line here. No, my fence line goes here. Oh, well, we need to get this resolved. It's not a case of misconduct. It's just a misunderstanding of where's the fence line meant to be between these two neighbouring properties. So that's resolved in private courts by objective standards of law. There will always be nuanced details of confusion about who is right and wrong in some complex situations, like the fence or the neighbour's fence is too low, it's too high, etc. So courts, they're always going to have business in solving disputes, because that's probably another part of human nature, conflict, right? So we want to build a system to solve that conflict in the most equitable, objective way possible. And this is it. If a party finds the judgment unfair from a private court, then they can pay for a second opinion at another court. And so then that brings in a major question. Well, what about court conflicts? Because in this system of utopian realism, it's all capitalism, it's all competition, there's no monopolized court, there's privatized courts. There's competition, just like there is competition with fridges and ovens and shoes and t-shirts and tea towels, with everything else. Competition makes all products and services better. It's a standard principle of economics and capitalism. When there are conflicts between courts, and there will be, they can ask for assistance from other courts, and there'll be a formalized procedure which ends up happening over time. The judges will hold conferences and present their reasoning behind their arguments. In time, a resolution will be made. And really, this is just what's happened in the current system as well, which is good. It may be difficult, it may take time, and it may involve many third-party courts and judges, but ultimately, a fair and objective middle ground will be found. And if we look at history of courts, there's lots of different courts that go up in hierarchy. There are some good precedents, it's just a lot of the time they get ignored today. But we just look what's already been done successfully, model that success, because that success leaves clues, and all those clues are visible to us. So we take what is useful, discard the rest. The current legal system is not all totally nonsense. There's a lot of good stuff, and you just take that or cutting out all the crap. If the courts are involved in a particularly difficult stalemate, they can appeal to members of the community for a democratic vote. But this is only as a last resort, because matters of law should be dealt with first and foremost by professionals, and 99% of the time they will be. But for that very rare case when the judges can't come to some kind of conclusion, they can get assistance from the public, from the rest of society. And obviously it's going to be fixed to a geographical area, and you could make a whole video just about that as well, but that's just a short summary. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to learn more, I've got a playlist of videos about law, rights, morality, objectivity, justice from myself and from other people. I highly recommend checking that out, and that would just be a taster. That would just be a start, but it would be a bloody good start. So on the next video, we're going to be going into public property and services, which will be a lot shorter, probably a third the length of that video. I think that video was maybe the biggest or the second biggest in this series, because the policy one will be quite large as well. Actually, yeah, the next video is quite small, might be 20-30 minutes, if that, where I'll be talking about public property and services, the misnomer of calling it public. It's the wrong use of the word, and the solution, which is privatization. Privatization of everything, which will be fantastic. Awesome, so I'll see you in the next video.